The Lead Masks of Vintém Hill, August 20th, 1966. Niterói, Brazil. 3:45 in the afternoon. The air is thick. The kind of heat that presses down on everything. On the rooftops, on the streets, on the long dry grass of the hillside. The kind of heat that makes the whole city feel like it's holding its breath. 18-year-old Jorge da Costa Sarmento is climbing the slopes of Vintém Hill, a scrubby, overgrown hill on the outskirts of Niterói, just across the bay from Rio de Janeiro. He's looking for a good spot to fly kites. It's the kind of afternoon teenagers disappear into. He pushes through the dense brush. The city noise fades. And then the smell reaches him. Sweet, heavy, the kind of smell that doesn't belong outdoors. And then he sees them. Two men lying on their backs in the tall grass, side by side. Both dressed in formal suits, jackets, ties, dress shoes polished to a shine. Completely still. Still for some time. Jorge takes a step closer. He doesn't want to, but he does. And that's when he sees the masks. Each man has a crude covering strapped over the top half of his face. Not cloth, not leather. Something heavier, darker, with a dull metallic surface that catches no light. Lead. Both men have handmade masks fashioned from lead sheeting, tied across their eyes and upper faces with rough cord. They lie perfectly still in the tall grass on a hill that no one comes to, dressed for an occasion no one knew about, waiting for something that is never going to come. Jorge runs. He finds the police and tells them what he saw. And with that, one of the most baffling, most debated, most genuinely inexplicable cases in the history of South American crime, or whatever category this actually belongs to, is opened. It has never been closed in any meaningful sense. Not really. Two successful men, two handmade lead masks, a folded note with instructions for a meeting that no official investigation could ever fully explain, and a hill that, 60 years later, still hasn't given up what it knows. What were they waiting for up there? Let's find out. To understand what happened on Vintém Hill, you first have to understand who Manuel and Miguel actually were. Because the easy version of this story, two eccentric loners who wandered off and died, is not accurate. The truth is both more ordinary and more unsettling. 3 days before Jorge found them, on the morning of August 17, 1966, two men said goodbye to their families in the city of Campos dos Goitacazes, about 280 kilometers north of Rio. Manuel Pereira da Cruz was 32 years old, a television repairman, skilled, practical, good with his hands. Miguel Jose Viana was 34. He ran his own small electronics shop and was known in his neighborhood as reliable and competent. Both men had families, homes, routines. Neither was wealthy, but both were stable, respected, not the profiles you associate with tragedy. And yet, in the months before August 1966, something had shifted in both of them. Friends and family noticed it but struggled to name it. An intensity that hadn't been there before. A distraction. A sense that their minds were working through something they weren't sharing with anyone. What they were working through was this. Manuel and Miguel had become deeply, seriously involved in Spiritism. Spiritism in Brazil is not a fringe cult. It has deep roots in the culture, blending elements of Christianity, African religious tradition, and the European spiritualist movement of the 19th century. Millions of Brazilians practice it. But Manuel and Miguel were not practicing ordinary spiritism. They had built, in the garden behind one of their homes, what neighbors described as a secret laboratory. No one outside their circle was ever invited in. But fragments emerged afterward. Radio equipment, transmission and reception devices, handmade components that went far beyond anything their day jobs required. Notes, calculations, what appeared to be experimental logs. There were circles in Brazil at that time on the farthest edge of the Spiritist tradition who believed that contact with other dimensions was not merely metaphysically possible, but technically achievable. That the right combination of mental state, chemical preparation, and radio frequency could open a channel, could allow a human consciousness to reach something beyond ordinary perception. Manuel and Miguel believed this, practically and literally. They were not theorists. They were engineers. They intended to build the mechanism and use it. On the morning of August 17th, they apparently decided they were ready. They told their families they were making a practical trip, electronic components, a second-hand Chevrolet, normal things, the kind of explanation that ends a conversation. But they were carrying 2.3 million cruzeros in cash. That was not money for a parts run. That was money for something serious, something arranged in advance, something someone on the other end was expecting to receive. Whatever Manuel and Miguel were walking toward, they had been planning it for a long time. What we know about their final hours comes from a handful of witnesses, fragments of a story that grows stranger the more closely you examine it. 2:30 p.m. They arrive at the Niterói bus station. The weather has turned. The sky over the bay has darkened. 2:55 p.m. They walk into a small store and buy 2 identical cheap raincoats. The shopkeeper remembered them clearly. He said they seemed focused and purposeful, like men on a timetable they couldn't afford to miss. He used the word mission. 3:45 p.m. They stop at a bar. This stop is one of the most discussed moments in the entire case, because of a detail so small it barely registers. And yet it doesn't fit. And the things that don't fit are always worth examining. Miguel orders a bottle of Magnesita mineral water, drinks it quickly. The waitress notices he seems distracted and nervous, checking the time repeatedly, barely talking to Manuel, barely present in the room. When he finishes, Miguel asks for the bottle deposit back. A few cents. Essentially nothing. A man carrying millions of cruzeros, stopping to collect a deposit worth less than a bus fare. Some say it was habit, the automatic behavior of a man trained to be careful with small money, regardless of what else was in his pocket. Some say it speaks to a dissociated mental state, a man going through the motions of ordinary life while his mind was completely elsewhere. But there is a third reading that refuses to go away. What if the bottle mattered? Not the deposit, the contents. What if the water itself had been prepared in advance, carrying something meant to be taken at a specific time? What if returning the bottle was simply tidiness, removing evidence of a step in a process? We don't know. The toxicology that might have answered it was never successfully completed. 4:15 p.m. Manuel and Miguel get into a jeep. This is one of the most critical and most overlooked facts in the entire case. They did not own a vehicle. They had arrived by bus. And yet, at 4:15 p.m., someone drove them toward Vintém Hill. That driver was never identified, never named by any witness, never brought forward voluntarily, disappeared entirely from the record. Someone knew where they were going. Someone transported them there deliberately, and that someone vanished so completely that 60 years of investigation has never produced a name. 4:15 p.m. was the last confirmed sighting of Manuel Pereira da Cruz and Miguel José Viana alive. According to the note found in Miguel's pocket, they arrived at the agreed location at approximately 4:30 p.m. Picture it. The rain has arrived, light but steady. The slope of Vintém Hill is slick, the air cooler than an hour ago. They climb to a position with a clear view of the sky. They lay out the raincoats on the wet ground and lie down on them, side by side, on their backs, in their suits, in the rain. They are waiting. The note, as investigators reconstructed it, contained instructions written in advance, not instructions they were reading for the first time, but a record of a plan already internalized. Be at the location at the agreed time. Take the capsules after 4:30 p.m. Once the effect begins, protect your face. At some point, the note suggests 6:30 p.m. They take the capsules. What those capsules contained has never been established. The toxicology failed. Whatever was in them went to the grave with the men who swallowed them, and every theory about what they were is exactly that, theory. After the capsules, they put on the masks. Think about what it means to make those masks. Someone, Manuel, Miguel, or both of them in that garden laboratory, took sheets of lead and cut them to fit a human face, made straps to hold them in place. This was not improvised on the day. This was prepared at home, deliberately, as part of a plan that had been in motion for months. Lead blocks radiation. Lead blocks concentrated light intense enough to damage the eyes and skin. These are facts of material science that two trained electronics technicians knew perfectly well. They were not making ceremonial objects. They were making protective equipment. They were expecting something that emitted enough energy to require shielding. Now we come to Gracinda Barbosa. Gracinda lived near the base of Vintém Hill. On the evening of August 17th, she was at home when something caught her attention outside. She looked toward the hill and saw, hanging in the sky above it, a bright oval shape, orange, luminous in a way distinct from the overcast evening light. It was there long enough for her to register it clearly, and then it was gone. She told this to investigators. She told it again to researchers who came years later. She never wavered. She never embellished. She said what she saw and nothing more. There are two ways to sit with this. One is to note that eyewitness testimony of unusual aerial phenomena is unreliable, that the human brain constructs meaning from ambiguous visual input, especially at dusk in poor weather when something is already emotionally charged. The other is to note that Manuel and Miguel came to that hill with lead shields over their eyes at a precise time scheduled weeks in advance, waiting for something they believed would emit enough energy to blind them without protection. And that a woman at the bottom of the hill who knew nothing about any of this saw a bright oval object in the sky above that exact location at the exact moment their note identified as critical. You can decide what that means. I'm not going to do it for you. What happened on that hillside between 4:30 and some unknown hour that evening, I can't tell you. What I can tell you is that Manuel and Miguel never came down from it alive. Police arrived at Vintém Hill on August 21st. By then, the bodies had been in the open air for approximately 4 days. What they found was orderly in a way that was itself disturbing. No signs of struggle. The grass around the bodies was undisturbed. The raincoats were laid out neatly beneath them. The men were positioned with a formality that suggested intention rather than collapse. The money, all 2.3 million cruzeros, was gone. No wallet, no cash, no trace. The only items remaining were the empty water bottle, the coats, and the note in Miguel's pocket. The note was short and precise. Investigators paraphrased its contents as, "Be at the agreed place at the agreed time. Take the capsules after 4:30 p.m. Once the effect begins, protect your face. Protect your face." That phrase has been analyzed for decades and remains stubbornly opaque. Protect it from what? From light? From radiation? From direct visual contact with something that couldn't be safely observed without a barrier between them and it? The note didn't say. It assumed the reader already knew. It was a reminder, not an explanation. The autopsy deepened the mystery. Decomposition was more advanced than the elapsed time should have allowed, even accounting for tropical heat. The toxicology came back inconclusive. The organs were too degraded to yield usable results. The formal cause of death was never officially established. Read that again. 2 men found dead under clearly unusual circumstances, with evidence of a planned meeting with an unknown party. And the official investigation closed without ever determining what killed them. Some believe this was the result of genuine investigative limitations. A police department in 1960s Brazil without sophisticated forensic resources, dealing with a case that had deteriorated beyond the point of useful analysis. Others believe the investigation was deliberately under-resourced, that a case involving spiritism, possible narcotics, and reports of unidentified aerial phenomena was the kind of case that certain people preferred to close quietly. Neither version is provable. Both are plausible. What is not in dispute is the result. No charges, no cause of death, no suspect, no explanation for the missing money or the unknown driver. Just 2 dead men, a hill, and a note that explained everything and nothing. 3 main theories have emerged over the decades. None of them fully satisfies. Each one accounts for something the others leave unresolved. The first is the spiritist experiment, the theory most favored by investigators who work the case directly. In the fringe communities of Brazilian spiritism in the 1960s, there were groups who believed that contact with other dimensions was technically achievable through a precise combination of chemical preparation, meditation, and transmitted radio frequency. Manuel and Miguel were not casual believers. They had a lab, they had equipment, they had a schedule written down to the minute. Under this theory, the capsules contained psychedelic compounds, possibly LSD, largely unknown in Brazil in 1966, or a locally synthesized equivalent. The masks were practical eye protection for the visual phenomena they anticipated. The entire operation was an experiment they had designed carefully and were now executing. And it went wrong. The dosage was miscalculated. The compounds were stronger or more toxic than they realized. They lay down on that hillside, took what they had prepared, and their bodies shut down. This theory is coherent. It accounts for the masks, the capsules, the timing, the secrecy. It requires no outside actor, except for the money. 2.3 million cruzeros does not go to a self-directed experiment. That money was going to someone. The second theory is darker and harder to dismiss. Manuel and Miguel were engineers, not gullible men by nature, but in those final months, they were in a state of profound belief, the kind of belief that creates a framework inside which almost any request can be made to seem reasonable. Someone who understood that framework could have exploited it. Two men with an obsession and cash to spend. A third party who knew about the obsession. An arrangement made through channels that left no trace. A meeting at a location chosen by the third party, with substances provided by the third party, transported by a driver arranged by the third party. The money was the motive. The mysticism was the method of control. The capsules were not a spiritual preparation. They were poison, the mechanism of a murder designed to look like misadventure. After it was done, the driver took the money and disappeared. The scene was left tidy enough to read as ritual rather than crime. And the investigation, limited by resources and perhaps by will, closed without ever establishing how these men actually died. Under this theory, Manuel and Miguel were not lost experimenters. They were targets, killed by someone who understood that a spiritist ritual gone wrong would not generate the same investigative pressure as a straightforward murder. No suspect was ever named. The third theory is the one that refuses to leave. Gracinda Barbosa's account has never been disproven. The orange oval. The timing aligned with the critical moment in the note. The preparations of two trained technicians who built lead radiation shields because they anticipated something that emitted dangerous energy. There are researchers, serious ones, not only enthusiasts, who argue that the lead masks case cannot be explained by any theory confined to conventional parameters. Their argument rests not primarily on the aerial sighting, but on the technical nature of what these men did. Psychedelic users do not fabricate radiation shielding. Spiritual seekers do not write timed operational protocols with specific trigger conditions. Manuel and Miguel applied engineering logic to whatever they expected to encounter. They identified a practical problem, protection from a specific type of energy, and they built a solution. And according to one witness at the base of the hill, something was there. Manuel Pereira de Cruz and Miguel Jose Viana were brought home and buried. Their families received no explanation, no cause of death, no account of where the money had gone. They were told the investigation was closed. It has never been reopened. Vintém Hill is still there on the edge of Niterói, largely unchanged. The brush is still thick. The slope is still quiet. People who know the story sometimes make the climb, some out of curiosity, some because certain places develop a gravity of their own over time. The lead masks are preserved in a small museum, crude, heavy, shaped by hands that are long gone, for a purpose that no one has ever officially confirmed. Not dramatic in the way a crime scene photograph is dramatic, just quietly, persistently wrong in a way that stays with you. 60 years later, the questions at the center of this case are exactly where they were in August 1966. What was in the capsules? Who drove the Jeep? Where did 2.3 million cruzeros go? And what, if anything, appeared above Vintém Hill on the evening these two men lay waiting for it? No answers, no closure. No official version of events that holds together under pressure. Just a hill, just a note, and two lead masks carrying the weight of everything that will probably never be explained.